Well, good morning, everyone. We at Cachets Software would like to welcome and thank you for joining the webinar today. As you can imagine, the webinar platform itself is being heavily used. If you're having issues staying logged in or it seems a bit sluggish, please be patient and know that you may need to log in again. We do recommend that you view today's webinar in full screen mode, and this can be done by clicking the full screen button on the webinar's control panel. Use the orange arrow for collapsing and expanding that control panel. We also encourage you to use the questions feature located on the control panel to type and send any questions that you may have during the presentation. All attendees are muted as we are recording this webinar, and we will be sending the recording in a follow-up email within the next few days. At this time, I would like to introduce Prabha Manavaskar, our president.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone. Bill, do you want to switch over to the screen? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today's webinar is focused on EVV once again, and this is as a result of DHS making an announcement and us being prepared to proceed with the necessary EVV activities. And so I wanted to start by saying that this presentation is being done by Samantha. I'm just doing the intro. Bill is going to be providing some of the EVV application related demos. So let's get started. Today we have a packed agenda. First, I'm going to cover what DHS communicated. And a lot of times when DHS communicates, they're very concise in their communication. We try to come up with our interpretation of what that is, and we'll cover some of that. And what are some things that you should do to prepare as we roll out EVV over the next few months? And what is Cachet doing in preparation for EVV, as well as a quick demo of our product and some of the new capabilities that we have. And Sam's going to cover a variety of EVV rollout best practices. We've done a number of rollouts and several customers are on EVV now, and we've learned a lot, and we'll be sharing a lot of that with you. To start with, let's talk about what DHS communicated back a couple of weeks ago. First of all, this communication was really focused on the phased rollout of EVV, and then what DHS is trying to do is to manage and learn from the EVV rollout so that it can help others. First of all, the first phase is FMS providers. There are 14 FMS providers in the state, and based on communications with them, they expect the FMS providers to comply by June 30th. And comply in their and what they mean by comply is they want the EVV providers to, the FMS providers to be connected and transmitting data through the aggregator. And what this implies, and they've stated this, is they don't expect everybody to be sending, not all caregivers to be sending EVV data. They just want them to be connected and start down the path of getting everybody onboarded, but they don't expect everybody to be online by June 30th. Also, they have stated that MCOs might not be included in phase one, and this is an interesting twist, and we've been expecting this, and mostly because there is some complexity in getting the MCOs implemented. So for most of you that are on this call, phase two is what applies. Phase two is all the other personal care providers, and the expectation is that by end of 2022, DHS expects the other PCA, or rather personal care providers, to be connected and transmitting data. And in terms of when that will begin is unclear. Again, based on DHS's communication, phase two will roll out in July, or rather after FMS is up and running, and they've been somewhat vague, but they seem to imply that it's in July. So we'll wait and see what happens. And phase three is for home health service. That's end of 2023. We have time for that, so we're going to sort of table that for the time being. But let's focus on what DHS really said and our interpretation and insights based on communications we've had, other presentations we've seen, emails we've sent to DHS. So we put all that together and we've come up with our understanding of what DHS's expectations are. So why the phased approach to starting with FMSs? Well, the main reason is there are 14 FMSs, and so it's a small group of providers. FMSs also tend to be national in nature, and being a national provider, they have experience having done it in other states, and they're hoping that the FMS providers would bring some of that experience and expertise to Minnesota. That's one thing. The second is many of the FMS providers are large and complex and sophisticated with their technology, so they feel that they would have an easier time implementing and getting EVV up and running, and DHS really is looking to learn from that. I think it's a really smart move, and this is really going to help us. And as a non-FMS provider, I think it really benefits the rest of us. And the reason is, everything that they learn through this, they're going to run in some quirks and some issues, but those will all get worked out. And by the time the rest of the non-FMS world gets on and starts using EVV and sending data to the aggregator, I think we're going to have a easier time, and we would have learned a number of things having worked with the FMS providers. So I think this is a really good thing for the non-FMS providers. Why are MCOs not included? Good reason is that our interpretation and understanding is that MCOs, obviously when you send claims to, say, a Blue Cross or Health Partners, that claim data is with that particular MCO. Now, HHA has to build integrations with those MCOs, pull all that claim data in, and make it available so that they can compare the EVV data with the MCO's claim data to then do some validation. To do all of that, there is some back-end database work that has to happen, and our understanding is that none of that hasn't been completed, and as a result, MCOs are not going to be included, at least in phase one, and we anticipate that it's going to take a while before they're ready, and that you would have to wait probably, I'm guessing, towards the end of the year before this is mandated by DHS. So nothing that you have to do different as far as Cachet is concerned. We have the ability to send MCO as well as non-MCO EVV data to the aggregator. So I don't see this being an issue for us. It's something on DHS's side to prepare. Another anecdote that we received or heard in conversation is DHS prefers and recommends the use of the app versus the phone, which is IVR, or a fob-based system. And DHS, and again, this is a smart move by DHS, the flexibility and capabilities of the app are much better than trying to use an IVR system. So if you're thinking about and wondering, which is the better method to use, DHS themselves is recommending an app-based method to send in visit information. And this is also important to clarify the difference between EVV and electronic time capture. And the reason this is important is EVV, of course, is capturing GPS information when you clock in and clock out, whereas electronic time capture is very much like paper timesheets, except it's an electronic version of it. It's essentially meaning you could enter time after the fact, or you could enter a number of days in a batch mode, and having this information electronically transmitted means that there are situations where this applies and would make it easier. For example, live-in caregivers is one that DHS has indicated that will not be required to clock in and clock out in real time. You can imagine a mother taking care of a child and having to clock in and clock out when the mother is, obviously doing a variety of things all day long to attend to the child's needs. It doesn't make sense to clock in and clock out. And again, DHS has always been very good about listening to the stakeholder groups, and this was one of the issues that was brought up in the process, and it has been something that they have now stated that they're not going to require clock in and clock out. So in this particular scenario, the mother could enter time at the end of the week and in a batch mode, and doesn't have to clock in and clock out, and will greatly simplify and make it easier for the mother. Now, this is something that we heard based on some questions that we had submitted to DHS. When we asked how wide should the geofence be for clocking in and clocking out. So just to give you an idea of what this means, if you have a home address of a client, a geofence is a virtual fence around the client's address that says, okay, if you're within that virtual fence, your clock in is a valid clock in. And when we asked DHS what that virtual fence should be, they said 500 miles of home address. Well, that defeats the purpose of having EVV, but that's what DHS got back to us, and this was only a couple of days ago. We're going to further clarify this, and we'll keep you posted on what we find, but that is somewhat of an odd decision by DHS, and we'll further clarify this and let you know what we hear. So what does it mean for a agency to comply? Here's our interpretation. Number one, get up and running with EVV and have some of your caregivers using the app and clocking in real time and clocking out in real time. This information connected through our platforms will get transmitted when DHS is ready, will get transmitted to the aggregator. And if you have some of your clients complying, I believe, and we believe, that this is what it means to be compliant with DHS by end of the year. Now, that's what we know as of today. In July, hopefully they'll further clarify this. But based on what they have said to FMS providers, we believe the same thing will apply for PCA providers. They're not expecting everybody to be up and running on a application and clocking time in and out. They expect some portion, and a small portion of users or caregivers in your organization to clock time and have it connected to the aggregator and the information sent in. This is, again, a smart move on DHS's part, because they recognize the complexity of rolling this out. They recognize that it's going to be burdensome for agencies as well as clients and employees. And so they are sort of slow rolling this to make sure that people have time to adapt to the new system, make the changes, and get comfortable with it before they say that everybody has to comply. So I think that is a really good thing. Okay, that's pretty much what I had. I've got Samantha, who's been working with a number of agencies. First of all, for those of you who don't know Samantha Frederick, she ran a large agency, now is the product manager for Pavilio, and she's got firsthand experience having implemented EVV almost a year and a half ago, and now is helping a number of Cachet customers implement, troubleshoot, and improve EVV for our platform. And Samantha is going to cover a variety of things, starting with what you should do as an agency to prepare for EVV. Samantha, take it away.
Thanks, Prabha. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. First of all, we want to recognize that you're all at different points in your EVV journey. So next slide, please. So if you haven't started your EVV process at all, what should you do? Well, first, don't panic. We've got a simple 3-step process to get you started on the right foot. First, you'll complete your enrollment form. This will tell the state vendor who your agency is and what services you provide. To be prepared, there's a list of items required for enrollment, including your UMPI number, tax ID, a technical person at your agency, Cachet as your vendor with a contact person at Cachet, as well as the number of persons served, the number of caregivers in your office, and the number of office staff. For the full list of required information and to complete the enrollment form, go ahead and go to the link on the screen. If you have questions or you need the contact information for somebody at Cachet, you can send an email to our support line, support@cachetsoftware.com. The second step, you'll need to indicate that you're using Cachet software for your EVV partner. You'll have to do this by sending an email to edisupport@hhaexchange.com and indicate that your agency will be using us for EVV and that you'd like to integrate with the aggregator. This seems like a duplicate step, but they'll send you an attestation form if you've not yet completed one, and this will ensure your connection is complete without issue. The third and final step is to go ahead and connect with us at our Cachets support line to let us know that you're starting your EVV implementation. We have experienced staff here to help with questions as you begin your EVV journey. So where you go next depends on where you're starting. If you're already in Pavilio, you have many resources already at your fingertips. Go ahead and check out the help area to find an EVV implementation guide, including a PDF document for both caregivers and clients that'll walk you through how to use the app to clock and approve time. This also includes agency tips and short informational videos for getting started. You can send an email to support@cachetssoftware.com to be notified of our upcoming EVV rollout webinar, where we'll go more in depth around agency preparedness, as well as walk through all available tools. At the end of the webinar, you'll also receive access to an EVV expert. If you're using Cachet Legacy and are either in process of or looking to migrate start EVV, contact us as soon as you can to get on the migration schedule. There are many agencies making this transition, and we want to be sure to get you on the schedule and dedicate time to you. But there are things you can do in the meantime. First, you can clean up your legacy data. There's a migration report that you can run that will alert you to the areas that need to be reviewed before you make the move to Pavilio. This will allow you the best start and the cleanest transition into the new system. We'll help you complete your migration, moving the data along with getting you and your teams trained to use Pavilio. While going through this migration, our dedicated project manager will be available to assist you with your EVV implementation, discussing available resources and best practices. And lastly, if you're in Legacy and you'd like to stay in Legacy, this is okay, at least for the time being. However, long-term, this is not a recommended option for a number of reasons. Pavilio has many benefits that were built into the system through lessons learned from using Legacy, including increased visibility and tracking of clients and employees, streamlined EVV processing, and an easy-to-use billing platform, decreasing the number of denials significantly, down to 2% compared to the Medicaid standard first-time denial rate of 18% actually. And this is huge. There are also a number of EVV benefits and new features and enhancements that will happen in Pavilio EVV first. If you want something shiny and new, choose Pavilio EVV. If you've started and haven't rolled out yet, then at least you're ahead of the game. It's still important to make sure that you've completed the 3 steps to the enrollment and getting connected to the aggregator. But now let's get back to your plan. Starting with evaluating your setup. Make sure to connect with your champion. Every agency needs a champion, especially for a project of this size. You'll want someone dedicated to the success of the project, understanding there will be hiccups, and being willing to work through them. Then review your project plan. Where did you leave off? Does the project rollout still fit with the new timeline? As an agency, take a look at the resources needed to jump back in. And we've got office hours available to answer any questions that you have around project setup. Having a solid plan is key to a successful rollout. Go ahead and email Cachet support if you'd like more information on the open office hours. Next is communication. Good communication is required. This includes internal communication, what's expected of whom and by when. This will help minimize staff frustration and streamline EVV adoption. There's also external communication. Communicate with your clients. Tell them what your agency plan is and what the timeline is that they can expect. People inherently dislike change, so the more notice you can give them, the better. Also, be sure to communicate the benefits of EVV. Yes, it's required, but if you have to use it, you may as well make it positive. In Pavilio, they'll have the ability to sign off on timesheets either daily or all at once at the end of the pay period. And they can sign off either on the caregiver's device using their assigned PIN number, or they can sign in with their own credentials. These are options available and they can make it their own. You'll also need to communicate the plan with your caregivers. Understand that this is a huge process change for them. It's a whole new set of expectations. Much different than jotting down the hours at the end of 2 weeks. Be sure to lay out these new expectations for them. Be available for questions and be patient as they learn the process. If my 85-year-old grandmother can learn and now really likes Facebook, your caregivers can learn EVV. It just may take them a little time. On to the pilot. The pilot is very important. It seems scary until you get going, but pick a small group of clients and caregivers who you know will be interested in giving it a shot. The more eager they are, the better. And ultimately, if you want a group of people who will be willing to work with you. There will be bumps. It won't be a smooth, seamless process, but you'll be able to better define both your process as well as the expectations as you go. Keep a positive attitude and know that you'll be in frequent communication with these folks, and this is not the time to try and break the system. You want to work the issues and get the wins. And lastly is your phased rollout. You've got a schedule with your plan. We suggest every 2 weeks, and that you launch these new groups and you'll get them in, get them trained, and work through their payrolls, submitting time through EVV. Start with the eager and interested groups and work your way through. There will be users that struggle, but you've got options. You can build in some incentive plans to help keep things going, and some agencies have really found this to be helpful. But you've got time. Make sure you take the time needed to work through all of the issues with your folks. So what is Cachet doing to prepare? Well, actually, we've been preparing for quite some time, and this is evidenced by the 8,400 active users we have using our EVV apps today. This is huge. These folks are ahead of the curve. We have several agencies where the primary way of entering time is through the app. Think about all the paper timesheets that wouldn't have to be hand entered into the system. We've completed our integration with the aggregator. We were certified back in January to be able to send our data. We're invested in supporting all the agencies we serve. And speaking of the agencies we serve, we're working with nearly half of the FMS agencies in Minnesota, and we've learned a lot already from the DHS start of this rollout. We are in a unique position as the only software company working along 6 of the FMS agencies through phase 1, and will pass along any knowledge we learn to you. And interacting with DHS is unique by itself, but we're in constant conversation with DHS to clarify the specifics around EVV. And there are still some unanswered questions, including the geofence, like Prabha mentioned earlier, but we'll continue to seek answers to these questions as we go. We'll be implementing a live-in caregiver attestation. With the exemption of the live-in caregivers, it's good to know that the caregivers actually live with the recipient. We will have an attestation in the app that will allow the caregiver to sign to this effect, removing some of the extra outside of the system paperwork that your agency may otherwise have. We'll also be hosting several EVV rollout webinars to assist you. We hosted one in February with many helpful tips for starting EVV. We'll be hosting future webinars, including a panel of providers currently using the app, and a webinar dedicated to helping you roll out EVV, including a tour of available resources. If you have webinar ideas or topics you'd like to see discussed, please send those our way. And we have live dedicated EVV support staff to help you with all of your questions. We have support staff on hand, can call. Our project managers have walked many agencies through this journey, and our support team is here to help. Unlike HHA, who only has an email support line, we have live EVV support to help answer your questions as you work through your implementation. And ongoing enhancements to the app. As we learn more about what DHS expects through phase 1, and as these expectations morph, we're committed to modifying the app to meet these requirements. So speaking of features in the app, we'd like to go through a few features today that are unique to Pavilio. First, we have a dual purpose app that allows both EVV and batch time entry. And this includes not only the real-time clock-in, but you have the ability to enter manual time, including the batch entry, to mimic an electronic timesheet. This is ready and waiting for your living caregivers to use and will be available for all caregivers until EVV is officially live. Activity capture based on assessed need. How many of you have had PCAs submit timesheets with absolutely all the ADLs and IADLs marked as complete? Staff run through the list and check off all the tasks, whether they completed them or not. And in these cases, DHS can actually do a takeback. In Pavilio, you'll enter the cares documented on the assessment, and these will be the only options available for caregivers to select. This cleans up both their expectations as well as your records. And not to mention, this goes beyond activity tracking. For services that require goals and outcomes, the goals that are defined in the CSSPA can also be documented in the app. Verifying units availability at the time of clock-in. Pavilio not only verifies MA eligibility, but also available units when caregivers clock in. If the client does not have units available, caregivers will receive an error message stating there are no units available and they need to contact their agency. Agencies set thresholds and warnings. This happens to be one of the configurable options in Pavilio. At the agency level, you can indicate the threshold for Pavilio to display the warning message that the units are running low and the error message that will not allow time to be clocked due to out of units. Another configurable option is the geofence range. The geofence range is right now kind of up in the air, but as we learn more from what DHS decides and what they'll require, your agency is able to set this threshold in the configuration section in Pavilio. Viewing hours in the app. Caregivers are able to see a weekly total of hours worked in the app, updated as they clock time. And this will help them better manage their hours available, as well as avoiding the costly overtime payments for you. Caregivers working for multiple agencies will have a single user account. This is a unique feature to Pavilio. A caregiver is able to log in with their email and will be able to select which agency they're clocking in for. And lastly, non-EVV services can also use the app for recording time. We recognize that as an agency, once you begin to capture electronic time, you won't want to live in both worlds, paper and electronic. So unlike the state vendor, Pavilio offers the ability to document many non-EVV services electronically. Along with the features available for the caregiver, there are many great features for the client and responsible party as well. In-app timesheet approval and rejection. Clients and responsible parties can view the submitted timesheets right from the app, where it can either be approved or rejected. If approved, it can go right to the agency for final approval, and if rejected, they can make a note as to why it is rejected, and it'll go back to the caregiver to make adjustments. The agency is able to see from Pavilio that there are draft or incomplete timesheets. Viewing all usage in real time in the app. Historically, to manage the services, the client or responsible party would rely on paper statements from the agency for usage. They would receive these by mail and would typically be several weeks behind the last usage documented. The operative word is historically. With an in-app real-time view of usage, they'll be able to see the use right in the palm of their hand when they want to look at it. And dual role logins. For responsible parties who are also employees, these folks have a unique role that would previously require two separate email addresses for them to sign in to each account individually. This is no longer the case, and with one email address, the user is able to log in and select the role being performed. As you can see, we really enjoy the enhancements. We love to see new features coming soon. And here are a few of the new features you can expect in the near future. Push notifications. A big benefit to having all staff in the same app is the ability to communicate with them. Through push notifications, your agency will be able to increase communication with caregivers and clients and responsible parties. App-based signatures. When logging in as an RP, wouldn't it be great to sign off on documents to support your client right from your app? Or as a caregiver, wouldn't it be nice to be able to read the client documentation and sign right on your screen? This is an enhancement that will be coming soon. In biometrics, we've recently added the ability to save the password in the app, but we're expanding this to include biometrics. If set up by the user, this will support either the fingerprint recognition or the face recognition abilities on the device. Live-in caregiver attestation. We touched on this earlier, but with the live-in caregivers being exempt from the EVV process, you'll want to ensure that they actually live with the person receiving services. You will be able to capture the caregiver attestation right from the app, no additional paperwork required. And IVR. As an alternative to the EVV app, IVR, or the telephone landline clock-in, will be available soon. Now that you've heard me discuss the unique features of the app, as well as our philosophy to continue to add new features to make your lives easier, I'll turn it over to Bill for the live demo of the Pavilio EVV app. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Samantha. Good morning, everybody, and thanks again for joining us. As a reminder, before we dive into the app for a little bit, if you have any questions, in the webinar side panel, there's a link where you can submit questions, into our team, and we'll answer as many of those as we can before the end of the webinar. Anything that comes in later or we're not able to get to, we'll send out in a communication after the webinar is concluded. And so what I want to do is just take a few moments and show you a few of the features that Samantha just went through. These are some of the unique features that we've built into our EVV apps. What I'm going to do from here is show the app from a web browser. The app can be used from a web browser if needed, as well as it's available in the Play Store and the Apple App Store as well. So first thing we'll do is for a user, we'll log into the app, and the first thing you'll see is the different role selection. And this was one of the features that Samantha mentioned, where there are many cases where one user, one person has multiple roles. They're both the caregiver and the responsible party for an individual. And this is how that works. With that same user ID, the system prompts the user to see, what role are you playing? Are you the caregiver now or the responsible party? And that's because the app has different features and different requirements based on those roles. So first thing we'll do is we'll log in as a caregiver and just show you some of the time capture features that we mentioned. Okay. When I log in, most users will move to this menu where the little person icon at the bottom, and they'll see the care recipients that are linked to them. This will show, names and addresses and photos if you put it into the system. From a very simple standpoint, if I'm going to clock in and begin serving that person, I hit that clock in button, and then the system will prompt me, what kind of service are you providing based on this client's service agreement? So it will show you the services that are set up in the system. And as you can see, in this case, not only is our PCA services, listed as an option, which is part of the EVV requirement that the state has put out, but other services are also available, like housing stabilization, which is an unlicensed service, not required under EVV, but is available in our app to be used for time tracking. That way your caregivers, regardless of what service is being provided to your individuals, can track all of their time and all of their information, all of their notes from one place, rather than having to use multiple systems.
If I clock in this case as a PCA service, the system brings me to a screen where I can record my notes, record information as the service is being performed. It will identify the service agreement. It'll identify the service code for me so that I don't have to select it. Identifies my location, and then the activities are shown. And so just as we mentioned earlier, this is based on the care plan that is set up in Pavilio so that the caregiver only sees the activities that are applicable for these types of services. Instead of seeing the list of 12, you've got a small list of 3 to select from. I can record my notes, put in my notes into the system as we go, and then I can even sign the time card right on the screen. If you've got a touch screen device, you just use your finger on the screen. If you're using a laptop or a Chromebook or something of that nature, the mouse works as well. And then I can clock out and end the visit all in one step and submit this into the system. Okay. So that's a real-time example. That's someone who's able to clock in when they start work and then clock out when they're done. But there are many cases, many times when that's not possible. Perhaps you had an issue with connectivity or your device, or you are a live-in caregiver and don't need to record time in real time. So in that case, what a user would do is open the details for that specific client. And at the bottom of the screen, you've got a button for where I can add visits. Okay. And from this screen, again, what are the services that I'm providing? And so I can select any service where I can add timesheets. In this case, because we're entering the time manually, I have a date range where I can fill in. And as you can see, we've noted instructions here for the user. I can enter a date range where I can do 1 day, like we've shown here, or I can do as many as 7 visits at a time. So as an example, I can click on the field and we can back up and say, we're going to record time from the 20th of April through yesterday. Again, it knows my services. I can adjust the times to fit what is the actual time that I provided service. And then we can add these visits into the system. So with one entry, you can now see instead of just one time record, the system has created one time record per day. It still allows the user the ability to delete a specific day if I didn't work on Thursday, or I can edit the times day by day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Well, Friday I didn't work until 10:30. I left at 9:35. Okay, so I can make all of those edits in one screen. Still record my notes and still record my signatures all at one time. So this gives your users a lot of flexibility. And so those that are used to recording time or want to record their time, on a day-by-day basis, once a week, as I go, you have that ability, you can do that. And if you want to record the time as it happens in real time, you have that ability as well. So the system is very, very flexible for all of those different options. And then just as an example of a different type of service, we have the ability for those intensive services like InHome Supports, where this is actually an intensive service that requires a CSSPA and could require goals and outcomes to be captured for that individual. The app is flexible and reads the setup for that system just like it is in Pavilio, so that the system knows for this type of service I have different requirements. And so now instead of ADLs, I can see goals and outcomes I need to record. I might be counting things. I might be recording a yes or no value. For those of you providing intensive services, you're familiar with this concept. And so the app is flexible enough where you can, again, use one app to record all of your time for all of these different services. So now we're going to log out for a moment. And we're going to log right back in as the same user. You know, as you can see, the app has recorded and remembered my username and password. You know, this is built into all of the apps. And so now I'm going to log in as a responsible party. You know, I'm a guardian or a responsible party. If I'm a responsible party for multiple clients, which does happen, you know, frequently, I would have a list here where I can select who are my clients that I'm providing care for. So we'll log into Marjorie's system. At the top of the screen, I have an indicator that says I have some unapproved timesheets that need to be reviewed. And so, you know, this is the sign off by the client or the responsible party. I can again review multiple time cards at one time, and then I can review the details. I can approve them or I can reject them all from this page. And then additionally on the dashboard, you can see the different tiles for the different services that Marjorie is authorized to receive. So I can see the service agreement. I can see the dates of service that are available. The app will show me not only how many hours have been consumed, you know, as of a specific day, but then shows me what is available for each of these services going forward. How many hours or minutes per day, per week, or per month are still available to the end of the service agreement. And if I scroll down each of the different services that Marjorie has available, you know, housing services, PCA services, all of the different service lines are available, and I can see those available time frames across the board. So that's our demo for today. If you've seen the app, you're familiar with the rest of the functions. If you haven't delved into the app in more detail, you know, reach out to our team and they'll be happy to do a more deep dive for you to see all of the different functions that are available in the app and begin your migration process. Sam, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, thanks, Bill. For a quick recap of our tool here, you saw the dual role login for the caregiver and RP, the activities based on the care plan and what was available for each client, real-time unit utilization and availability, verifying that at time of clock-in, seeing the 245D outcome tracking in the app. You saw that non-EVV services like housing stabilization, as well as employment services are available for electronic time capture. Caregivers can work for multiple agencies using the same login, and that looks very similar to how the caregiver and RP displayed, where they would just select which role, instead they would select which agency. Clients can sign on the so there's a PIN number that they're authorized and they're able to sign off right at the time the service is provided. The live-in caregiver attestation will be in the app. Shared care, MCO billing, the clock-in validation, so that's checking for your MA eligibility, the availability of units. We do have real-time OIG report checking, so if a caregiver falls on the OIG list, their account will be disabled. And it also verifies that there's a pay rate set up for the caregiver to perform that service. And our app does not require a schedule. This is a little comparison between the state offered solution and the Cachets EVV app. So a few keys to a successful EVV rollout. There are 3 foundational pieces to EVV Success, and that is your people, your process, and your tools. Your people are your most important asset. Communicate with them about what's coming before it comes. As much as people don't like change, it's worse when the change is a surprise. And be sure to set realistic expectations. Also remember to empathize with them. It's important for staff and clients alike to know that you hear this, so take the time to listen. The process, implementing this. This is a significant change with the way the time is entered into the system, but it's also a change for the way that it flows through billing and through payroll. It's key to evaluate the whole process and be willing to adjust it. And lastly, the tools. It's important to remember that having a tool doesn't make you automated. If used incorrectly, it will actually have the opposite effect. You need to understand it and embrace it. EVV is only about 20% of the tool set. You need the whole platform to work together for the best experience. Integrated is best. So if you have a really good time clocking tool, but you have to do workarounds to get the time entered, or you have to bill MCOs outside of the system, you're still wasting your time. Having them all connected and in one place will not only allow for time entry, but correct unit calculation and just general ease of use. Evaluating all these 3 areas as you start your process will set your agency up on a good foundation to start your EVV journey. And now we're on to the roadmap to EVV Success. First, your champion. We discussed a bit about the champion earlier, but this person is key. You need someone dedicated to the success of the whole project, willing to take a look at the big picture and work through all of the issues. And communication. Any project will fail without good communication. This includes having not only your internal and external communication, but having solid FAQs and process guides. This will keep all of your processes up to date, and staff change frequently, so having these process guides in place and current will be key to ongoing success. Embracing change. Change is hard and it takes time for people to adjust. Be patient and stick with your plan, knowing that there will be some course correction required. The pilot is really important. This is time for you to walk through your onboarding process, identify and sort out any issues, and streamline ahead of your full rollout. Focus on solving each issue as it comes up and improving your process for the whole group. Then on to the phased rollout. First, stick to the plan. There will be struggles, but by taking manageable groups at a time, you'll ensure needs are addressed as they come up and that you're on track to meet your deadline. And also remember, it's about progress and not perfection. The squeaky wheel does not always get the grease. It's easy to focus on one client who's very upset and lose track of the other 50 who are perfectly happy. Don't sweat the small stuff, the issues will pass. So what do our customers have to say who are using the product? There will always be squeaky wheels. Started slow, and it was tough to make the change, but we picked up speed. That's just the way it's always been. It's one of my favorites. It's the way it's always been. Why do we do it that way? I don't really know. Migrate to the platform and then migrate users to EVV. Don't try and do it at the same time. They're 2 separate processes. Not all devices are built equally, and not all users are the same. And that could not be more true. Change is difficult, but no more paper timesheets to be entered into the system. It's well worth the change. And finally, empathy for the users goes a long way. As you're making changes for your agency, remember that it's changes for the end users too. Have some empathy for them and listen. And lastly, some takeaways for you. I hope today we gave you a better understanding of DHS's timelines and expectations. Steps to get started with EVV. It's a big task, a big project. So we're hoping to break it down into small bites for you and make it a bit more manageable. We have resources available already to help. Check out our help area and send a message to support if you need assistance. We're happy to assist. Features of our EVV tool and how it can help you be successful. The demo today was to give you a brief overview of what we have that might set us apart from other providers. We're happy to go into further discussions and do a more deep dive into the demo, as Bill said, to help. EVV best practices for a successful rollout. Having a strong foundation is key to setting yourself up for success right out of the gate. And December will be here before you know it. So don't wait. It's best to start now, get a head start, take your time, and do a great job onboarding all of your folks into the world of EVV. Lastly, we discussed our upcoming webinars. So here's a QR code on the screen if you'd like to sign up for the next webinar, Pitfalls, Promise, and Pavilio for implementing EVV. Thanks for joining us today, everyone.
Thank you, Sam. That was really good. We have a little more time here and would like to take the opportunity to answer some questions. We have several questions that have come in. I'm going to pick out a few and share them with you. Meanwhile, if you have other questions, feel free to enter your questions in the question dialogue and we'll be happy to answer them. So here are a couple of things that came up that I thought would be helpful for everyone. The first one is the idea of signatures. Currently in our app, you can, as Bill demonstrated, you can sign as a caregiver and you can sign as a client or a guardian or a responsible party. But the whole idea of signature on a mobile device is somewhat redundant. And we are seeking some guidance from DHS because in most systems, if you have a user ID and you sign into the system, then by default, the system knows who you are. And then making you finger sign your signature just doesn't make any sense. So this is a relic left over from the paper timesheet days, and we would really like to see that gone, but we are trying to get some clarification from DHS for that. So the way we see it working is you log in, you provide, you clock in, you clock out, and by clicking on a checkbox saying I approve this, that should be essentially the signature. So there was a question as to whether we should do this for all services or not, and we might decide to change this after we get some guidance from DHS. So that was one question. The second question is there are a couple of people in there, and this tends to come up in many of our conversations, is what do you do if the person doesn't have a smartphone? And the reality is there are people that don't use a smartphone and need to be able to enter time. And while that is still something that is that the system needs to and will provide, it is not our focus. We will eventually have the IVR capability. We have it mapped out. We just haven't built it out because for two reasons. One is there are a very few number of people who will use it, and because DHS doesn't require 100% compliance right out of the gate, we are delaying the development of that. And I would advise you to also delay the rollout of people that don't have smartphones, because the number of people who will have smartphones are going to be higher, and though getting them up and running is going to require some time, and DHS's compliance requirement is have some people sending stuff through. So I would pick the ones that are willing to use a smartphone, are eager to use a smartphone, don't want to use paper, get those people up and running, and then get to the more difficult and the ones that don't have access to smartphones as the ones that you implement later in the rollout. And that would simplify things for you, as well as will make it easier on the clients. We had a couple of other questions that came up. Let me see. Which one is that? There was a question about shared care. Shared care is we have shared care up and running. We have two different applications. In as we mentioned, we work with 6 out of the 15 FMSs, 14 FMSs in the state. And the FMS application already has shared care built in. We're going to transfer that code to Pavilio in the future, but we haven't done that yet. And part of the reason we haven't done it is there are fewer number of people affected by it. And if you're going to implement EVV and roll it out, we encourage you to roll out, as I said, the ones that are sort of the plain vanilla, as well as people who want to get up and running in EVV, get them up and running. And we anticipate shared care probably late summer timeframe, and will be available in Pavilio. So I would, while I know that it's one thing that you need to do, if you've got everybody else done and you come to me and say, hey, I got everybody, when can I have shared care? I'm going to have a lot more urgency. And a lot of our customers haven't done that yet, but they seem to be worried about shared care. We intend to implement it. It's just we have to prioritize based on where the biggest need is. And there's a number of things that we're doing to improve the platform, add more people, like Samantha said, there are 8,400 users of EVV already, and there are other features that we need for them, so we're trying to prioritize that. Bear with us as we prioritize and get this out, but we will definitely have shared care in the system. Anything else, Bill, that was a question that we should answer? There was a question about mileage that came up. Mileage is one of those things that applies to some services, not to all services. We will have mileage tracking in the system. The first step to that is to be able to track non-billable time. And then the second step is to be able to track the travel time between, which can be recorded as non-billable time today, but travel time, and then to map that in Google Maps and capture the traveled time. We know that this is, again, needed, but it affects a smaller number of people, and therefore it's being prioritized lower in our list of tasks, but it is something that we anticipate having. Well, that's pretty much what we have today for you. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Thank you for being a customer. For those that are not a customer of ours, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help you. And as a final thought, when HHA started rolling out back in middle of last year and started contacting agencies, there were a number of agencies that signed up with HHA or started working with HHA. And recently we've seen and had a number of agencies that have come to us and said, hey, we are looking for someone that provides greater level of support and understands Minnesota better, and have come to us and asked us to provide EVV services for them. So we always feel that the local presence and our ability to know about the DHS rules and be able to support our customers is one of our strengths. And if you are looking for an EVV service, please join us. And if you're a current customer of ours, thank you for being a current customer, and thank you for joining the webinar, and have a great rest of the week.